Well, it's been a couple of years since I first reviewed these. It's time to revisit the Twilight Saga. What's up everyone, and welcome to my first franchise review of 2024, aside from plenty of others I got planned. I put up a poll recently on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and Threads, and asking what would be the first franchise review you picked. A lot of people said Alien, a lot of people said Austin Powers, a lot of people said Twilight, and the order I put was the Dragon Tattoo series, the Swedish trilogy, and the Fincher film. So, with that being said, the first big franchise review of the year we're going to kick off with is Twilight. This is of course part of the Twilight Saga, 5 movies. I spent the last 2 weeks watching these movies and taking notes so I can re-review them. And this is going to be a fun review series. So let's talk about the first installment of the Twilight Saga, Twilight, released in 2008, directed by Catherine Hardwicke, based on the novel by Stephanie Meyer, and written by Melissa Rosenberg. Stars Kristen Stewart, Robert Pattinson, Billy Burke, Taylor Lautner, Cam Giganjin, Rachel Lefevre, Ashley Greene, Peter Facinelli, Elizabeth Reeser, and so many others. This is going to be a fun review series to get into, because not only I get to talk about these movies, but also I get to talk crap about a lot of the problems these movies has, even for someone's guilty pleasure. So let's go into this and let's get going. So now that I give you guys the cast and crew, let's talk about the plot. The story of Twilight follows a 17-year-old girl named Bella Swan who moves from the sunshine of Arizona to the cold, wet town of Forks, and she goes to live with her dad. There, during high school, she encounters, of course, a vampire named Edward Cullen, and this movie focuses on the development of Bella and Edward's relationship and the subsequent efforts of Edward and his family trying to keep Bella protected from another coven of vampires. So in 2008, I remember how big this was, because I remember seeing a lot of advertisements on TV for this. A lot of people were saying this is a vampire romance. I never read any of the books, and at the time, this started the whole Twilight phase with the Twilight fandom. You have merchandise coming out, you have people getting the books signed, people were just hyped to see this movie. It was a big culture phenomenon in that. And when the movie came out, this movie got some pretty good buzz. It grossed $407 million against a $37 million budget. And this movie was originally in development with MTV Studios, which had a different version of this that differed significantly from the book that was written. So Summit Entertainment acquired the rights after the project's stagnant development, and Melissa Rosenberg wrote a new draft before the writer's strike in 2007 to 2008, which affected a couple of TV shows and movies, especially Revenge of the Fallen and such. They shot the movie from March to May. It took place over 44 days, and the movie was released on November 12th to pretty much mixed reviews from critics and also most audiences. And a lot of people really enjoyed some of the story. Some people really don't like these Twilight movies. And in retrospect, this movie came out the same year as movies like The Dark Knight. And originally Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince was going to come out this year, but they pushed it back long enough for that movie to fully finish some more production stuff and to fully let Harry Potter fans breathe and anticipate. So the critical reception was not very good here, but the audiences were really eating this up at the time. And this movie got a lot of accolades for male breakthrough performance, MTV Movie Awards, best song, best female performance, best kiss, best fight, and so many others. And over the years, these movies have gotten a lot of negative reviews from critics, and some audiences have been very negative or positive or in the middle. But also, this is the one big franchise, vampire related, that is known to have killed the vampire and werewolf genre for a very long time until a few years ago. So going into this, I was very curious to see how my perception of the film was going to go, even for someone, which I have to give full disclaimers for all of these reviews, even two of these movies I don't like. These movies are guilty pleasures. I know these movies are not good, but for some reason I still end up very much enjoying it. And if you follow me on my Instagram, you know that I was binge watching the movies through the entire 2-week process. I spaced them out. Rewatching this now in 2024, I'm not ashamed to say I still have some enjoyment out of this. Now, if we're looking at this movie from in this franchise, this is a franchise or a movie series that I would never die on the heels for. I would never say this is a great franchise. I'm fully aware that this killed vampires and werewolf genres for a little while, and back then you had a lot of good vampire werewolf stuff back in the early 2000s. Such, you had the Blade trilogy, which was continuing on from the first film from 1998. You had Buffy the Vampire Slayer, which was ending. You had Angel. You had the Queen of the Damned, which was a huge guilty pleasure for me. You had movies like Brotherhood the Wolf, which I am actually really curious to watch because I've heard some great things. And you had tons of other vampire content before this. So, but with that being said, the hype for these movies was crazy. From a critical standpoint, yes, if I'm looking at this critically, we can trash this movie all day long. But subjectively, this is still a guilty pleasure. This movie has some things I could commend it for. One, I will say there are some pros here. I think the cinematography looks nice, even though there's one issue I do have when it comes to the cinematography aspect of the movie, which is the monotone feel, which we'll get to. I will say it's a very well shot and a very well lit movie with the blues and the greens and such. It looks like a competently made film. It looks well shot, it looks crystal clean, it looks really well created. Some of the sweeping shots, the moments of action, even the quieter scenes with Bella and Edward, or the high school scenes, or the scenes with Bella on her own, they look very well shot from a technical standpoint by Elliot Davis. Production design is also really damn good here. Really enjoy some of the supporting cast in here. You have Taylor Lautner here, which he's tolerable in here. He's not great. His character and his acting ranges from quite meh to bad as these movies go along. But I will say for this first movie, he does do fine here. So he's one of them I do think is fine. I think Peter Facinelli as Carlisle is good. Elizabeth Reeser, woo, absolutely beautiful as Esme Cullen. Ashley Greene as Alice was good. I enjoy the character of Nikki Reed as Rosalie, she's good. Justin Rathbone is fine. Billy Burke as the dad is cool. Rachel Lefevre as Victoria Sutherland, I think she is very beautiful, she's good. Eddie Gazzecki, Sarah Clark, and even some of the friends like Michael Welch, Justin Chong, Gregory, Tyree Boyce as Tyler, Kristen Stewart. Hey, those guys I think actually do a pretty solid job. And I have to be fair, I'll say Robert Pattinson does do fine for what he's given. It's not his best work though. Because there are moments in this where he is trying to deliver, but there's also moments, because the way this character is written and because the way the script is portrayed, it's not all that great. So definitely can agree that. And it definitely can see a lot of what everyone else could talk about. The acting ranges from pretty hit and miss. Some good, some bad. Also say I love the soundtrack of these movies. These soundtrack was awesome, man. Listening to it, I forgot how good the soundtrack actually was in this. Carter Burwell, his score is fantastic. I will say I really enjoyed the score, especially Bella's lullaby. It is beautiful, it's sentimental, and there's moments where it gets actiony. I love that. So Carter Burwell does a really good job in the score. I think he's a really good composer as well. I know his music from anywhere, like from billboards outside Ebbing, Missouri, which I'm not the biggest fan of that movie. I don't hate it by any means necessary. I think that movie is fine, but I think it's interesting. His music on Psycho 3, It Takes Two, the Buffy movie, Wayne's World, Goofy movie, Fear. He's done a lot of good scores that I really enjoy. There's also some scores I haven't really heard. So it definitely got to give it up to him. I really enjoyed the score that he gives here. But the songs in this are kick-ass. You have some great musicians in this. You got Muse, you got one of my favorites, and Paramore with Decode. I fucking love that song, Decode. The Black Ghost, Linkin Park, rest in peace Chester Bennington, Mute Math, Perry Farrell, Collective Soul, Blue Foundation. Even Robert Pattinson takes a stab into the soundtrack. So I'll say the songs in this movie are actually pretty damn good. I like the songs in this movie. When it has that guilty pleasure side of things, it gets entertaining. You can have fun with some of this cheesy dialogue, some of the weird awkwardness of Bella, and with some of the crazy Edward moments here. I will also say, rewatching this, I forget just how much funny and how so likable Anna Kendrick is. This was Anna Kendrick rising up to the top with this and Pitch Perfect and such. And of course, nowadays she's an Oscar winner. She's a great actress and one of my all-time favorite crushes. And can't wait for A Simple Favor 2 whenever they do it. I just forget how much fun Anna Kendrick is into this movie. So absolutely, definitely goes. And the movie has a budget. Even though some of it looks a little weird, which we'll get to, I will say the budget is on screen and it looks great. Now moving into the mixed side of things, I'm mixed on three things: the monotone feel and acting. Like I said, I think the actors do everything they can and what they can give with the supporting cast. But when it comes to some of the monotone feel and some of the monotone acting, where they're talking like this, where they have to be like that, there's moments in the movie where the monotone feel, I feel like they could put a little more inflection into their voice. But here, I would say for the weirdness of it all, it does kind of work. So I will definitely go there. So I actually really like that. It's a bit of a hit and miss, because some of it's cool, but after a while, it's like you want these characters to be a lot more animated and expressive and like put some personality into the voice as you would expect them to go. So that is a little bit of a mixed reaction there. The performance of Kristen Stewart is very hit and miss. A lot of people is giving Kristen Stewart shit for her acting, but having found a newfound appreciation for her, especially after watching Spencer, I think she is a good actress. Not everything she does is great or golden, but I do think she does what she can with the character of Bella. But it's really a mix between the directing, the way she's written, or the way Kristen performs it, where she's so awkward and stuttering, which, no, that is not a drug problem. That is the thing with Kristen Stewart, where she wants to make sure she get the lines right, so she will stutter in between some of it. So that is something you can actually kind of be okay with. But it gets to a point where some of it is a little too much. There are some moments where the pacing of the movie, this is one of the shortest ones for 2 hours and 2 minutes. Moments where it goes by really fast, some moments where it drags really slow. And I feel like we could have picked up more of a momentum. Like, just keep going, let's speed it up, speed it up, speed it up. I know you're trying to get us into the lore, into the characters, but I think there's a way you could have pace this a little better and make the romance a little bit better. Speaking of the romance, that's also another mixed aspect, because while it is unintentionally funny to see it, there is just also moments where it's not the very strong romance. It's not as bad as Anakin and Padme, or Tessa and Hardin, or even Anna and Christian. But in defense of Padme and Anakin, I can tolerate it to a certain extent. It makes you feel grateful that it's nowhere near as Tessa and Hardin. Now moving on to the negatives. Let's get into the negative side of this. From a critical standpoint, this script is fucking terrible. Melissa Rosenberg, it's amazing how she went from these movies to Jessica Jones, which is fucking fantastic. Fantastic show. Kristen Ritter, damn, she's gorgeous. Kristen Ritter's gorgeous.
And you know this, man.
It's very weird how she's went from Step Up to Twilight to Jessica Jones. So it's very weird when you go into that. So you definitely go into that because some of the script is necessary with some of the exposition and talking, but some of it is just a little bit too cringy, a little bit too hilarious, and a little bit too awkward. So some of them are a little bit weird. Some very unintentionally funny. I got a kick laughing at this. Times this movie, despite Catherine Hardwicke being a very well accomplished and renowned director, there are moments in this where it's not her fault, but the directing is very stilted. Where it's very stilted, it's very monotone, and it's very there. Some of the directing here is a little bit hard to talk about. There's some of it where it's very monotone, but some of it goes a little bit too unintentionally funny. But there's some moments where it's actually kind of competent. So I actually give credit to where credit is due. It's just a negative because it gets stilted sometimes. Also, I will say there are some very odd vampire decisions here. Like, they don't drink human blood, which has always been the thing about vampires. I get that these vampires are different, and I've always understood that, but I think just some of it is not really all that. And it's just kind of there. I hate the fact that you make the vampire sparkle in this. I've always hated it. Just every time I see the image of vampire sparkling, it just makes me laugh, because the vampires I know, like Blade and Lestat and Akasha and vampires from True Blood and all that such, they don't sparkle. They either, when they're in the sun, they get burned, or they just get sensitive to the light, which is why they have to sleep in coffins. And finally, I cannot fucking stand James in this movie. The character of James in this movie, Cam Giganjit, no disrespect to him, I think he does fine, but he's just so much of an unlikable little prick, where it's like, no, absolutely not. I do not like this portrayal. I don't like the way how he's just so overly horny for Bella. Like everyone else in this movie, they just are pretty much Bella is welcomed by everyone. I'm like, is there ever a couple of people in this movie where they're not being welcomed by, besides Victoria or Laurent? He gets a moment in this movie where he's just so over the top, and it gets so unintentionally ridiculous.
Tell Edward how much it hurts. Tell him to avenge you. Tell him.
What are you doing?
Tell him. Tell him.
Especially in that big fight, which I'll say that fight between Edward and James, that's pretty cool. There's some action there I enjoy, so.
You're alone, because you're faster than the others. But not stronger. I'm strong enough to kill you.
But it's just James as a character is so unlikable, and he's not really all that strong. In conclusion, guys, I will say that this is not a movie I will die on the hill for, and this is a movie that I know a lot of the world hates, and I should hate this movie, and I do hate certain things in this movie, but there is a part of me that can go along with the stupidity, that the dumb shit, all the over the top ridiculousness, and I can just sit here and rewatch and have fun with. Not a great movie by any means necessary, but definitely a decent enough guilty pleasure that if you can turn your brain off, you can definitely have fun with. But if you are someone who is a big vampire geek like me, you can definitely get irritated with this. And with that, that's my revisited review of the first Twilight in a nutshell. Well, that's going to do it for the video that you just watched. If you want to see more, my channel icon is up here. If you want to see more content from me, all my social medias are right here in this end card. I will also leave a playlist and a video here for you to see what the channel is about. As always, acknowledge me, stay Epictastic, join the Epictasticness, and you guys keep it cool.